if you allow me, just a quick parenthesis on tourism, because it was raised as an opportunity. Indeed, it is an opportunity. It is a very large industry, and tourism arrivals in least developed countries tripled between 1998 and 2008. It's a large industry. It's a big job creator. People are increasingly interested in going to rural areas. Tourists are increasingly interested in going to rural areas. One challenge there is the issue of leakages, meaning that suppliers, enterprises, tourism enterprise, tend to import the goods and services they provide, and that deprives the local economies of income and jobs, of course. And this loss, these leakages, represent something like 50% in developing countries. But let me turn to the presentation itself. The basic question of why enhancing rural work and rural transformation today has two sets of strong arguments, particularly strong for Africa. The first is that it simply is a must, economically as well as socially and politically. It is crucial because, as we've seen, half of the world population lives in rural areas, a proportion reaching over 62% in sub-Saharan Africa, where actually 8 out of 10 persons economically active, meaning in employment or seeking employment, are in rural areas in a number of countries, such as Rwanda and Tanzania. Because also it is indispensable to focus on rural transformation to achieve the Millennium Development Goals and the poverty and underemployment reduction targets, as we've seen this morning, so I will not go over data and other details. And unemployment, and especially underemployment, also concentrate in rural areas and are particularly serious among youth and women. Also, a number of missed opportunities abound in rural areas, such as important shares of crops that are lost, up to 1/3 in some countries, because of lack of local capacity to process, proper storage, capacity to market or transport them. And also human resources that are now largely underused, underdeveloped, and basically undervalued. And we've seen the importance of human resources this morning. Again, underemployment, particularly affecting youth and women. New opportunities are also cropping up. New economic activities, such as rural tourism and ecotourism, pisciculture, organic farming, a large set of green jobs from local production of solar energy, energy again being also a large bottleneck in rural areas in some countries, and other green jobs such as forest maintenance, water management, and so forth. Also, new processes such as value chains and more accessible communication technology. And this we've seen this morning, so I will not dwell on it. However, a number of important challenges continue to impede taking advantage of those opportunities. We have seen marked underinvestment in economic and social infrastructure and decent work deficits, in particular underemployment and unemployment, insufficient enterprise support, insufficient development of relevant skills, widespread child labor. That is a core area. 60% of total child labor concentrates in agriculture. So that's a big concern. Difficult and sometimes dangerous working conditions in rural areas and limited social protection. Difficulty for minimum labor standards to reach rural areas, among others, due to weaker labor inspection in rural areas, and lack of a strong voice of rural workers and employers. This we mentioned a couple of times also this morning. Actually, the voice of rural communities as a whole is generally weak and hardly manages to reach national levels and lobby for stronger support from national public and private actors. But in recent years, concerns over climate change and the environment, the food security crisis, the economic crisis, massive migrations, and socio-political stability are increasing attention to rural areas. This because rural areas are both major victims of this crisis. For example, over 2/3 of food-insecure persons are involved in food production, which is quite striking. And because rural areas can be an important part of the solution to this crisis as well. For instance, by reducing the volume of lost crops mentioned earlier, and improving working and living conditions and job opportunities to attract youth to stay or return to rural areas. This set of major concerns are creating now a sense of urgency to focus on rural transformation and its job creation. That is a momentum that we need to take advantage of, to mobilize and invest sufficient attention, resources, and collaboration to tackle those stifling challenges. The second argument for investing greater attention, resources, and collaboration in rural areas is that there is capacity in terms of experience and expertise to tackle those challenges and unleash job-rich rural development. We are not starting from scratch. There is experience of successful rural work nationally, and we've seen the example of Brazil, and in the international community. But that at least since the early 1970s, when the development paradigm actually shifted from urban to rural for a couple of decades, before structural adjustment actually came into the picture. There is also considerable expertise, particularly if we pool the knowledge, approaches, tools, and lessons learned of the many national and international actors. In ILO alone, we have created and are using over 50 rural relevant tools in areas such as employment-intensive public works, local economic development, that is basing methodologies to get the community, the stakeholders in rural areas around the same table and arrive at consensus about strategies and ways of implementing them. Community training, support to entrepreneurship and cooperatives, child labor, microfinance, cost-effective occupational safety and health, micro-health insurance, development of workers and employees associations, and helping enterprises and people move from informality to formality, for instance, through cooperatives, trade unions, and professional organizations. There also seems to be a growing convergence of views among development actors about what to do. For instance, the need to support a combination of farm and non-farm activities, around the view that rural areas have potential and that investing in them to unlock that potential is good business. And there is also agreement around the decent work agenda and its four complementary pillars of labor standards, employment, social protection, and social dialogue. That started in the ILO, but is now becoming a common language across the whole development community, including the European Commission and the African Union. And I will not go over the objectives of course, the EC and African Union, but they're very much convergent with those of ILO. So we hope EC and ILO and African Union could join forces in an action-oriented partnership so that our technical comparative advantages and experience can make a difference. As for the will, well, the will is there, partly. The words are there and the intentions often too, but in reality it is trickier to translate those words and intention into action, as we've seen also this morning, as there may be strong interests in keeping the focus of attention of interventions and investments on urban areas and on urban stakeholders. What we see in some cases is a will to act for rural transformation clearly present at local level and among local stakeholders, but less so amongst stakeholders and decision makers at national level. The second logical main question is how to empower rural areas, and I'll go quickly over 5 sets of elements that appear indispensable. First, a sharper vision of rural areas. This means more and better data. I will not go into that issue, but it's a crucial one. A sharper vision also means developing a more positive view of rural areas that should no longer equate rural with backwardness and unattractiveness, but focus on the growth and job creation potential. And here we need to mobilize, use considerable imagination, and public-private partnership, including the media. Second element, focusing on specific target groups, and these are rural women and youth, and developing interventions that help them develop their potential, including giving them a voice in decision-making. Third, using integrated approaches. We've seen that this morning quickly as well, which entails roughly 3 things. Packages of interventions or holistic approaches covering various complementary areas. Also, approaches that develop the capacity of rural stakeholders to express their needs and aspiration, and that help them participate in developing and implementing rural strategies and programs. Last but not least, the need to develop coordination and synergies among national actors, different ministries, local and national authorities, but also between political, economic, and academic circles and think tanks. And also the need to build alliances among actors, nationally and internationally, who can champion boosting rural transformation and can reach strategic policy decision-making levels. That is a big missing link. The fourth element is pragmatism. A good deal of successful approaches exist already, as mentioned earlier, within a given country or abroad. We need to replicate them, upscale them if necessary, and make them become part of national development strategies and policy. Last but not least, a call for action. We need to move fast and decisively from words to action and to supporting this action. As mentioned earlier, ILO stands ready for action-oriented partnership with the European Commission, African Union, namely NEPAD, and other valuable development partners. Let me conclude pragmatically with a few words on a multi-agency program aimed at strengthening micro-small enterprises in 8 localities of Senegal that include a number of those elements. In that program, financed thus far by IFAD, ILO is providing training and support to existing and potential rural entrepreneurs, mostly youth and women, in enterprise management, but also in occupational safety and health, accessing health insurance and all the social coverage, sensitization to child labor and gender equality, and in how to come out of informality and join professional organizations. That is combined with training and support to local professional organizations in terms of internal management, in terms of providing relevant services to micro and small enterprises, and the capacity to advocate with local authorities for youth-friendly and enterprise-friendly policies. The program achievements are leading to its replication starting next year in Senegal and 10 other West African countries. And the next step will also include work to reach policy level and integrate this approach into national economic development and employment creation policies, including policies to enhance youth employment. Again, this link between approaches that work in selected local areas and the national policy is essential. Thank you, and sorry.